Welcome back. In the last segment, we considered the debate over divine justice, and in this segment, we'll examine the implications of this for the question of free will versus predestination. This was not only a theological issue, but it concerned the community at large. And this again is one of the constants of all theological thought. This question is found even on a purely secular human plane. It's an issue that is not restricted to believers. Are we free or are we determined? In the religious universes, whether Islamic, Christian, Hindu, or Buddhist, the question is of primary concern. This, of course, is very different from Watsonian behaviorism, which posits that our biological elements determine our psyche. Determinism in the religious context must not be confused with free will and determinism in modern psychology and philosophy. Today there's a debate as to whether we are determined simply by the chemical and biological elements which constitute our bodies, or are we free agents? Determinism in the traditional context means determinism through the will of God. That is, does God's will determine everything in our lives, or do we have free will? Now, in this crucial and central issue, the Quran indicates both are true. There are explicit verses of the Quran, for example, Huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir, that is, God is powerful over all things. On the other side, the whole of the Quran addresses us as morally responsible people. Moral responsibility always means freedom of choice. You cannot have morality and coercion. For example, in modern American law, if you throw a person from a balcony and he or she falls on somebody in the street and kills that person, the person who is thrown off the balcony is not then tried for murder because they had no choice in what happened to them. Always, responsibility comes with choice. So what do we do? This has been an ongoing and major debate since the first Islamic century. It's one of the most profound philosophical and metaphysical debates of all time. It's possible to solve this provided one realizes the relativity of the human state. But that's not a theological perspective, that's a metaphysical perspective. Once you take God being up there and we being down here, and both are taken in an absolute sense, it's His will and our will, you always end up in a dead end, one way or another. And there have been mountains of books written in all the different languages on this issue, with different theologians taking different sides. Actually, finding the metaphysical answer to this begins by posing the question correctly. The question should not be posed as if God is real and we are real, and the question is whether or not our free will is real. The correct way to pose the question is to recognize that God is absolutely real and we are relatively real, and then ask to what extent our free will is real. Then we can arrive at the real answer to this. I'm not expecting all of us to provide the answer, but at least to know the question. That is, it's not we who are real, while our freedom is an illusion. We're not absolutely real, only God is absolutely real. And our free will is only as real as we are. It's only from this vantage point that we can really solve the question, which is one of the great dichotomies that we face in life, between determinism and free will. Anyway, in early Islam, this issue came to the fore, and different people took sides, and the issue became politicized. By and large, the Mu'tazilites were on the side of free will, which was consistent with their view on the role of the intelligence in understanding divine justice, and therefore being capable of making a free choice between good and evil. Al-Ansary was on the side of determinism because of his view of the limited role of the intelligence in being able to discern right from wrong. Al-Ansary said that when we perform an action, God Himself gives us the possibility of performing that action, and we acquire that action from God Himself. That's why we think we're free to perform it. This is the doctrine of kasb, acquisition. It's very complicated, and I don't expect you to know the details for this introductory course, but I want you to have heard the name of kasb. That concludes our discussion of the relation between free will and predestination in the context of the debate over divine justice. Next time, we'll discuss the question of God's promises and threats and their implications for the hereafter.